the reminder of consequence is the most unpleasant thing that we can experience when we walk in darkness. Welcome back to the Lens Deconstructed podcast. My name is Daniel Owen, and today we will be continuing our discussion on Proverbs chapter 2. Last week we discussed Proverbs chapter 1, and the idea that wisdom here is the fear of Jehovah. On one side, the author, Solomon here, who is the king, is describing that recognizing our mortality, recognizing that we all must give account for the things that we do within the course of our lives, right? The things that we do, the things that we say, and the things that we don't do that we ought to, that at one point we will give account for all of those things. And so that behaving in the manner that recognizes we will have to give an account for everything, keeping in mind that God requires us to walk upright. This understanding, this knowledge is the beginning of wisdom. This is the beginning of understanding. On the other hand, right, we can remember, if you remember from Psalm chapter 14, verse 1, this is a psalm of David, and he talks about the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Does this mean that the foolish doesn't believe that a God exists in the ancient world? I don't believe that's really what the author here, David, is trying to say. Because really, the idea in the ancient world that there were no gods, plural or singular or otherwise, this is sort of unknown in the ancient world. There were the belief in the divine was pretty universal. So what was David actually saying when he says the fool says in his heart there is no God? What he's saying is the foolish person behaves as if God doesn't exist. He behaves in such a way as if he won't give an account for his life. And so we have on one side wisdom, which encourages the human being to behave with the understanding that they will give account. And on the other side is foolishness, where the human being is free to do whatever they want and completely disregard the reality that one day they must give account. And so we have these two juxtaposed ideas, foolishness and wisdom. We discussed that to a degree last week. And we're just going to continue on this trajectory. It's not about being terrified of an eternal consequence. That's not why you do the right thing. The reason that God gives us his commandments is for the days in which you don't want to do the right thing. And every human being on this planet, regardless of who they are, will find themselves in a situation where they know the right thing is this path, but man, do they really want to go this path? And this is the commandments of God are a reminder that for each decision we make, there is consequence. This is something to take seriously. And that the impact of our decisions will not only affect us, but they can affect those around us. So it's not a matter of being terrified of being cast into a lake of fire. That's not why you do the right thing. You do the right thing because it's the right thing, and because it brings about the best result, and it brings about the most preferred result, not just for us, but for those around us. And that going down the wrong path can bring about destruction, right? And so it safeguards us. It's a reminder, right? So it filters the natural instincts and preferences of the self-seeking mind to remember something that is more long-term. This goes counter to the reactionary behavior that can so commonly describe and define humans. And so this idea to take the path of long-term thinking, that doesn't necessarily produce the immediate results that we want, but in time produces the results that we all need. This is why the commandments exist. They bring about life, not just for us, but for those around us. Whereas breaking them will inevitably bring about destruction, right? If you murder, right, you don't necessarily need to say, "Well, I don't need the threat of a lake of fire to not murder someone. I don't want to murder anybody. I have no desire to do that." However, I imagine everyone who ever has, maybe there's a few exceptions, but I would imagine that a vast majority of people who have ever murdered in their lives didn't ever start out wanting to do that. Something happened, a series of circumstances, and eventually put them with a decision where they had to choose one way or another. And they chose to murder. Now, had they thought about the eternal consequence, right? This is what what we see in trials, right? We see somebody saying, "I can't believe what I did. I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it back. I regret." You see all these things if you've ever seen a trial, a murder trial, where they realize that the consequence of what they did is so far beyond what they could really make amends for. And this is what the Bible's getting at. Like, look, no one necessarily starts off wanting to do terrible things. The reason that it's the commandments are there are to establish within us a boundary line that says, hey, remember, if you cross this step, there's 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 potentially no coming back from that. So I want us to remember that as we go through these proverbs, what we're really establishing is wisdom, right? Understanding that God requires an account of what we do, and then there's foolishness, thinking that there is none. I wanted to just kind of put that out there before we go on to Proverbs chapter 2. Now, I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. We may stop a few times to elaborate or expound on a particular passage here, but let's get in. Proverbs chapter 2 from the English Standard Version, verse 1. My son. Again, this is Solomon. He's discussing now. Is he talking about his son specifically, or is he talking about the people of Israel? Is he talking about everybody who belongs to the family of God here? I'd say this is a bit more broad than just his son. I always want to make sure when we start reading that you know who's talking and who's the audience. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasures, then you understand the fear of Jehovah and find the knowledge of God. So he's explaining to the reader here, if you're placing value in that placement of value action, in order to learn and grow in insight and wisdom, if you seek it out like silver, if you search for it as you would search for a hidden treasure, you're desperate, right? You're truly going after something. This isn't like a side gig. This isn't something that you're, yeah, I'd like wisdom too. No, you're seeking it as if it were treasure. Then you will understand the fear of Jehovah and find the knowledge of God. And this is the point, right? As you seek wisdom, you're seeking understanding. It will become apparent to you that everything you do is meaningful and has relevance. Nothing that we do in this life is without a consequence or an effect, positive or negative. The ripple effect of every action that we take and every word that we say, and even the thoughts that we allow to sort of stay in our mind, all of those things will have an impact, not just on us and our future, but also on the people around us. And this is knowledge from God. This is God saying, "Yes, this is what I'm trying to tell you." For Yehovah gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. And again, there's a lot of words here that you may be unfamiliar with, but upright, those who are um, in right standing with God. Imagine there's a judge and he's looking at a person in front of him, and that person is good to go. This is someone who's upright. They are keeping God's ways, his commands. So he's saying that God stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity. So, right, he's protecting those who are, what is integrity? Those who say one thing and do another, that's not integrity. Those who, when no one is looking, do the right thing, who keep their word, right? Who are honorable. These are people with integrity. And so in this case, God stores up sound wisdom for the upright, and God is a shield to those who walk or live in integrity. Guarding the paths of justice. Well, that's a big one, right? So justice here, always ensuring, well, and you'll see this throughout Proverbs. It is our obligation not only to do what is right by us, but to do what is right by others. It is the obligation of the wise, of the upright, to, if they see an injustice, to address it. You don't just look the other way and pass on by. It's your obligation. You must do what is right. Yeah, the Good Samaritan. So verse 8, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his holy ones, or some will say his saints. Verse 9, then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity in every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant for your soul. If you seek this out, God will store up for you wisdom. He will be a shield for you, those with integrity. He will guard the paths of justice. He will watch over the way of his holy ones. And then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity in every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Right? You're not going to hate it, because it's for those who are guilty of living as if there is no God. It is for those who we see the hatred of wisdom. Why? No one wants to be reminded. If you live in a world of darkness, you don't want the light. You want to reject the light. Don't tell me what I'm doing. Why? Because the reminder of consequence is the most unpleasant thing that we can experience when we walk in darkness. The reminder that we will have to give an account for this, you don't want to hear. Ignorance is bliss. Let me just cover my ears, cover my eyes, and walk headlong into destruction. Don't remind me that it's coming, because I don't want to change. Right? This is what he's describing here. Because the wise, right, for wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. So the wise person is going to hear knowledge, and they're like, oh, okay, it's confirmation. I'm walking in the right path here. Discretion will watch over you, and understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, right? This way of dysfunction, Ra, from men of perverted speech. Does perverted speech here just mean, sexually perverted? Not necessarily, no. Perverted speech, this is people who are twisting things, right? Things are upside down and backward. So verse 11, discretion will watch over you, understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who, meaning these men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness, to walk in ways of darkness, like we were just talking about, who rejoice in doing evil, right? Dysfunction, and delight in the perverseness of evil. They actually take delight in things being twisted and contorted into dysfunction. They don't want things to be clear, and it's like the cynic. They want to see chaos. They want to see darkness prevail. Because when you're mired in the thick heart of darkness and evil and wickedness, the only thing that allows you to feel comfortable in that position is if the world is kept dark and there are more people with you. It's this herd mentality. It's why people don't want to go drinking at a bar alone. Why? Nobody. You don't want to be alone doing something that you feel that it is maybe icky and sad, right? No one wants that. No one wants to contemplate their own mortality. No one wants to feel the weight of their loneliness. No, 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 no. No, they want to rejoice. They want to rejoice in the perverseness and of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So, verse 16, so you will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. Now, there's this shift here, right? So, we've been talking about men who are perverting goodness, right? Their paths are crooked, they're devious in all their ways, they forsake uprightness, they walk in darkness, they rejoice in doing evil. Now we talk about the other side of this, right? So the wisdom from God is going to preserve the upright from those men, as well as from the forbidden woman. What's the forbidden woman? The woman that you can't have, right? What is this idea of forbidden fruit and all of the meanings that takes. There are things that you simply cannot do and things that you simply cannot have. Why? Because they'll destroy you. One of those things is the forbidden woman for a man, right? Or for a woman, the forbidden man. If you are married to you have a spouse, let's say you're a man and you're married to a woman, that woman is all that you have. You have no other woman in a sexual way. Any other woman is forbidden. Vice versa for the woman. If she has a husband, that is the only man that she has. Any other man is forbidden. Why? Because if you were to break your covenant, if you were to forget that you made a covenant with God and you were to reject the promise that you made and you were to go pursue someone outside of your marriage, you would not only bring destruction upon yourself, bring destruction upon those around you by your actions. It destroys people. So he's saying that wisdom, through this wisdom, this protection that wisdom affords, you will be delivered from the forbidden woman. Why? Because you're going to realize that path leads to my destruction. That realization will keep you away from it, right? From the adulteress with her smooth words. Why is he talking about her smooth words? He's saying that those words, those enticing, alluring words that try to drag you towards it, something that you know to be wrong, they will have no effect when you have wisdom and you see through them to the destruction that is on the other side of it. Who forsakes the companion, this is talking about this woman, this forbidden adulterous woman, who forsakes the companion of her youth, right? So she's forsaking who she should be with and forgets the covenant of her God, right? So she's forgotten the covenant she's made with God with this man that she's been with from her youth. For her house sinks down to death or Sheol, and her paths to the departed, right, to the underworld. So he's describing this, that her house leads to your death and destruction. This is poetic language, but it's telling a real truth, right? Does her house literally lead to some, cave? No, no. But this is describing what will happen to you. And her paths to the departed, to the underworld, to the Sheol. None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. This is powerful, right? You don't come back from some things. Verse 20. So you will walk in the way of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will inhabit the land. The land here is the land that God gave to his people. And those with integrity will remain in it. Right? So the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in the land. But the wicked will be cut off from the land. Again, cut off from the land. means cut off from the promise. It means cut off from God. And the treacherous will be rooted out of it. The word treacherous here meaning unfaithful. I think it's interesting here to see the unfaithful, faithless, right? Those who are not loyally obedient to God, those who act or deal treacherously, who betray a covenant. They're acting deceitfully. They're saying one thing, but they're doing the opposite. They committed to one thing, and they've done the exact opposite. So there was an opportunity for faithfulness, and they've been unfaithful. Those will be uprooted from the land. So neither the wicked, right? Wicked here, the Strong's Rasha. This is those who are evil, who are ungodly. They're breaking God's commandments. And then those who are unfaithful to keeping what they swore to keep, neither of those are going to stay in God's land here. And so, what is the value and importance of that final statement? Well, the land, this is symbolic of the kingdom of God. Right? This is the kingdom of Yehovah. This is where he dwells. This is his portion in the Old Testament story. So to not dwell in the land is to be cut off not just from the people, but to be cut off from God himself. I hope that you can see through chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Proverbs that there's this continuity of thinking, that there's this comparison between wisdom and long-term thinking, this reality of consequence, and then foolishness, behaving as if God doesn't exist, doing whatever is right in your own eyes, right? This is the life and death. This is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? So there were two trees that God placed in the garden. There's the tree of life. If they eat from that, they live forever. And there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is, I believe, both literal and symbolic, and that God places in front of Adam and Eve this whole garden space. They can eat from all of it, which includes the tree of life. They can eat from all of it. The only thing they can't do is eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or else they will die. So, in essence, God puts in front of Adam and Chava or Eve, he puts in front of them, 99 things that can be done, one thing that can't. And in that sense, he's given them his ways. You can do all these things, no problem. Just one thing I've established is wrong. Everything else is okay. So I've given you right and I've given you wrong. And then he steps back and he allows them the opportunity to choose. And they're very easily convinced that God is trying to keep something from them. That's why he doesn't want them to experience the knowledge, right? And this is what I often tell folks who are asking about this story. The knowledge of good and evil is in itself the understanding that you can reject what God has established as right and wrong and establish for yourself your own version of right and wrong. This is what we see when we hear this phrase, when God is referring in Deuteronomy to the Israelites. He says, when you were in Egypt, you did whatever was right in your own eyes, right? But now that they're coming into the land, they can't do that anymore. They have to do what God is defining as right and wrong. And so this is what we see in Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2 so far is in front of you, you can choose God's way or you can choose your own. If you choose God's way, this is wisdom. This is understanding that all actions have consequence. If you choose your own, this is saying, no, I will decide for myself what I'm going to do. But with that comes destruction. And some might say, well, that's unfair. Why is it that I can't do what I want to do? It's not that you can't do what you want to do. You absolutely can. Well, but of course, if I do what I want to do, then I'm punished for it. This is thinking as sort of this self-centric way of looking at the situation. A better way of looking at the situation would be like this. God created us with finite understanding. He sees problems before we see them. Imagine you're walking towards a cliff edge and you don't see it. You're unaware that there's a cliff in front of you and it drops off 500 feet or 1,000 feet, some terrifying distance. And you're saying, I want to walk this way. And God says, hey, don't walk any further that way or you'll die. And you're like, no, 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 don't tell me what to do. I'm going to walk that way. And you walk off the cliff. The reason that there's destruction and death for breaking God's commandments is that the world is governed by laws, right? If you behave in certain ways, if you set fire, like I mentioned last week, if you set fire to the world around you, it will burn you alive, right? It will destroy you. There's certain laws that take place. You can't do certain things without consequence. And so God's trying to prevent you from experiencing that consequence by saying, hey, those things will just, for example, when God says, don't commit adultery, like don't sleep with another man's wife. Why does that matter? Oh, come on, let me do what I want to do. Well, if you sleep with another man's wife, he might come kill you, right? This is what God's trying to avoid happening. You're going to cause another man to be jealous by sleeping with his wife. And in the case of David, King David, he not only slept with the man's wife, but he wanted to have him killed. It led to a continuing de-evolution of his behavior until finally he realizes, what have I done? And so these commandments aren't given to us to prevent us from having a good time. They're given to us to prevent us from killing ourselves. It's no different than when you tell a child, that stovetop is hot, don't touch it. We could say, well, yeah, go ahead. We could there are some folks who are saying, who say, oh, let them do it. They'll burn themselves and they'll know that, from experience, you'll learn to never do it again. Well, sometimes experience is a good teacher. Sometimes wisdom is learning that you don't have to touch the hot stove to realize that it's hot and it will hurt you and it might scar you. Um, you don't have to see destruction to be able to understand that destruction isn't what you want. You don't have to go down the path of a life of darkness and adultery and murder and lies and deception, right? And greed and envy and strife. And you don't have to go down a path of that to know that those things are bad. You can just see that the way of that leads to death. And I don't want it. Right? So God's not trying to keep you as some sort of overbearing parent trying to, lock up the child in the basement and say you can't go out and have any fun. That's just simply not the way that God is operating. He's a loving father who's trying to educate his children. Listen, I don't want you to taste death. I really don't. And that way you will. This way you won't. So choose this way, right? Choose life. So that's what we're starting to see from Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2. And as we go through the subsequent episodes, I hope that we'll start to see a lot of practical ways that these truths now become sort of amplified. And there's a lot of things that we'll learn together as we go through them. So I encourage you, if you have any questions, if you have any things, comments that you're interested in sharing with all of us here at the Lens Deconstructed or others, please, I encourage you to chime in and obviously keep it civil and keep it framed with an understanding that we're all here to help one another. But would love for you guys to chime in and give your feedback on what you're learning and what you'd like to learn, and or what you think we got wrong, what you think I got wrong. I'm happy to hear it. So thank you guys for joining today, and look forward to seeing you next time. And so I'll close this out with a prayer. This is if you've not followed us before, every time we in an episode we do the Aaronic benediction, or the Aaronic blessing found in Numbers. So first I'll do it in Hebrew and then we'll do it in English. Yevarechecha Yehovah vayishmerecha. Ya'ir Yehovah panav elecha vehonecha. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha vayasim lecha shalom. In Hashem Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. May Yehovah bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom, his peace. In the name of Yeshua, the Messiah. Amen.